All right. We're on to lesson 5, okay? And lesson 4 was all about parametrics in 2 dimensions, all right, in sketch mode. So, we covered things like uh, dimensioning something as a function of another entity in the sketch. We talked about fully defining your sketch as with a combination of uh, constraints and dimensions, among many other things. So now we're going to apply that in this practice. And we're going to learn tools to also use parametric modeling in the 3rd dimension, which we have not done yet. We've only focused on 2 dimensions. And we've pretty much covered, I would say, sketching pretty thoroughly, as it's the foundation for CAD modeling. You start with a 2D sketch, you fully define it. Once it's fully defined, you're then able to extrude it using a variety of tools. So far, we've only extruded using 2 different tools. We've covered a sweep extrusion, which is where you create the path that you want to profile to, extrude along. And we've also used just the basic extrude tool, where you take a certain profile and you give it some depth. At any rate, for practice 1 in lesson 5, we're going to create a new sawtooth design for this reciprocating saw. So if you haven't already done this, open up the design saw blade, which consists, of 2 components: an existing blade with a specific sawtooth pattern, and let's get into here. So an existing blade and blade design with the housing that the blade goes into, and you can see the sawtooths down here. So we've opened it up. Now they want us to create a new component and name it blade 2. So we're not going to delete the first blade. We just want to make a new design, and we want to be able to, say, flip-flop, turn on and off the visibility of the 2 different blades, so that maybe we can compare the 2 later on. So to do that, we're going to first add a new component, which you can do by clicking right here on the new component icon, or it's also found in the drop-down menu. It's the first option. So just real quick, covering the new component control panel here. We want it to be a standard part. We don't want it to be sheet metal, so we'll leave it at that. We'll leave it an internal. We're going to call it blade 2. Okay, a parent object is what the new component that you're making is directly linked to. All right, and so what that means is if you were to, say, delete the parent object, the new component would also be deleted when you do that. And so we wouldn't want to make, say, for example, this blade the parent object, because the 2 are the blade that we're about to create and this existing blade. They're not they're siblings, if you will. So instead, we want the saw blade assembly file, which includes the a singular blade and the blade holder. We want that assembly file as the parent object. So pretty much just think of it as whatever you want the new components to be directly related to and directly linked to in your overall assembly. That's what you want to make the parent. All right, we're going to click OK. You'll see that these went from being shaded to transparent with edges. We call that a wireframe view. And they're doing that just to show you that right now we are only able to edit blade 2, that component of our assembly. We could go in here and say activate blade holder. And now we're not able to edit either blade 1 or blade 2, but we can go in and edit the blade holder. Similarly, we could do this with blade 1, where we can create sketches off of this and make more extrusions, change it, what have you, without affecting the blade holder or the other blade that we haven't made yet. And if you want to see the whole thing all together, you go back up to your assembly and you activate that. Okay, so let's go back here. Let's see where we're at in our tutorial. Great, we haven't skipped a whole lot. We haven't skipped anything. We're going to start a new sketch on the face of the existing saw blade, okay, which is right here. So start sketch. All right, highlight that face. Okay, we're in sketch mode. I might minimize this for a second. And they're telling us it might be helpful to hide the blade and holder during the sketch so as to not just confuse ourselves. So we're going to simplify this. We're going to hide these. And you'll see that we still have like a very faint blue profile of the old saw blade. And the reason for that is we're creating a sketch onto that face. Or that's the plane that we chose. And so for that reason, it's projected that view of the old saw blade into our sketch, which is good. So what they want us to do is to create a line from here, from the first sawtooth blade to the last one. All right. And the next thing they want us to do is to highlight all the sawtooth saw teeth themselves, saw blade teeth, and turn them from actual segments to construction lines. Okay, and the reason for that is if we were to finish sketch, okay, if we were to finish this sketch and all right, and extrude this as is, let's just say a distance of 5 millimeters for the sake of going through this, you'll see that the closed object, which includes all the saw teeth, is what's being extruded, and we don't want that. We want to create a new sawtooth pattern, and from that we need to have just a blank blade, which was the whole point with creating that line. And so we need to turn the sawtooth pattern into construction lines in order to get a blank. So I exited out of that. Let's go back into our sketch within blade 2. Great. And we've kind of covered this already, but just to reiterate, construction lines, they're visible within sketches, but they're invisible when it comes to extruding or creating like a third dimension off of a 2D sketch. So once you've exited the sketch, construction lines are then invisible to extrude tools, which is the whole point behind coming in. And you can either click X or you can, oh, that's a spline. I don't want that. Or you can either click X or you can click construction, and it'll turn, all of our saw teeth that we've highlighted into construction lines, which will make them invisible. I'm going to click X from now on. Do that. And I might zoom out a little bit so that I can highlight more of these at once. Okay, so now you can see that, this line that we just created, it closes the object. In other words, it creates kind of a continuous path for this whole profile. So when we finish sketch and we go to extrude this like we wanted to before, let's just say 5 for now. Those construction lines of the saw teeth are invisible to the extrusion. They don't get picked up or noticed. And so therefore, this new line that we created becomes kind of the defining bottom of the blade. And that's what we want. So I'm not going to go 5 on that. I'm going to keep the sketch as is here. And I'm going to turn my blade back on so that I can see the wire view of it. Because next, we're going to extrude the closed profile that we just sketched, the thickness of the original blade, or blade 1. Now this is really important. This is an example of parametrics, okay, in the third dimension, and that is that you can click to object, and we'll open that up right now. So we're going to go first extrude. We're going to extrude this profile that we just made, and under extent type, we're going to click to object. And we're going to use the existing blade. We're going to, let's look at it from the right side real quick. Our sketch was made on the left side of the blade, and we're going to extrude it to the right plane, or the right side of the existing blade. So why would we do that, and how is that parametrics? Well, let's say somewhere down the line, for whatever reason, we want to change the thickness of the blade. Maybe it's too weak, and we want to strengthen the overall assembly by increasing the blade thickness. Well, if you didn't link the two blades together, if instead I had just extruded this using a manual dimension, then I'd have to go in, and for each new blade that I made, I would have to input a new thickness, right? But by doing to object, or to next, and defining this thickness off of the original blade, I would just have to change blade 1's thickness, and all the subsequent blades that I make, let's say I make 5 other ones, well, those thicknesses would automatically change or update. And so you can imagine, if you are to revise through a design, say, 50 times or whatever, or you have, 10 or 15 different blades to make and keep track of, using this form of parametrics can be really powerful and take away the tediousness of updating stuff. Cool, I hope that makes sense. You'll see that we kind of see the sawtooth profile still, and the only reason for that is we're seeing the wire frame of blade 1 still. They're both visible. So to confirm that we don't have any saw teeth on blade 2 yet, I'm going to turn off visibility here, and we can in fact see that that we don't have teeth yet, which is what we want. So I'll leave that off. Let's go back to the home view. Nice. Okay, start a new sketch on the face of the new toothless blade. All right. So we're going to be, at this point, we're going to be creating a new blade profile, or a new pattern. And so we're going to create sketch. Doesn't snap to, that's kind of silly. All right. And the first thing I'm going to do, right, is, well, the next couple of steps, let's just take a look at this real quick. We are going to create one tooth. All right, and we'll extrude that, we'll extrude cut that. Once we've created that one tooth, we're going to pattern that same thing all the way down the blade, okay, and using a pattern function, the rectangular pattern function. And so what we want to do is we want to define the pitch of the blade, which would be the repeating length from here to here, right? It repeats itself over and over and over again. We want to make that a, ideally, make it so that it lands perfectly at the back. So we're not, so that we have a numerical or like an integer value, number of teeth from the front to the back. So in order to do that, I'm going to measure. I'm going to use the inspect tool to measure the distance of our blade. And that is 128.5, okay? So let's say we want, let me get a calculator out. Let's say we want 160 teeth. So if I take 128.5 and divide it by, I believe it was 128.5. 128.5, yeah. Let me make sure. Yeah, 128.5. And I said 160 teeth. So we want the teeth to be, the tooth pitch to be 0.803. Let's see what that looks like if I were to draw that. So if I, come in here, go, you know what, let's just for the sake of changing it up, I'm going to create a, maybe an arc, a 3-point arc. All right, like so. Okay, and we want to dimension, like I said, this as 0.803. Okay, and we want to first of all close the profile. And again, going back to lesson 4, we want to fully define our sketch. So we have 2 black lines and we have 1 blue. And okay, we got to ask ourselves what do we need to do about that blue arc to fully define it? And it's hard to tell just looking at it. So what you can do is click and drag on it, and you notice that this point is fixed on this line, so that's good. But this point is free to move up and down. So how could we fix that point? Well, we could dimension, say its height, for example. We could dimension the magnitude of this. I'm going to call it a hypotenuse, but this segment. Or we could define the arc length as well. I think just for the sake of simplicity, let's define, let's define this point with respect to this edge, and let's make it 0.803 as well, so that we have a 45-degree angle coming off of this. I'm just making this up kind of along the way. That didn't define our arc yet, so what else do we got to do? And again, I'm going to go back and click on this edge to see. So by moving it, I know that I haven't defined the radius of this arc. So let's do that. All right, and let's just leave it at that. So the radius is going to be 0.6802. So we've fully defined our sketch, which means we're done creating the 1 sawtooth. And I'm going to extrude, and we want to make sure that the operation is not a new body. We want to extrude cut this profile. And again, we're going to use parametrics to, excuse me, we're going to extrude cut to this side of the saw blade. So if we were to make a bunch of saw blades and we wanted to change the overall thickness, well, we need to change the overall extrusion cut of this tooth as well, or else it wouldn't necessarily cut all the way through the new thickness. So make sure to do to object, and again, click the other side, and you'll see that it cuts it all the way through. And the last step to making this pattern, okay, or making this blade is going to be to sorry, before I get started, let's catch up here on our tutorial, make sure I'm doing this all right. Create a custom sawtooth sketch profile and extrude it through the blade. That's okay, that's what we just did. Create a feature pattern of the sawtooth cut equal to the spacing distance of the tooth cut you drew. All right, so I'm going to use a rectangular pattern, and I'm going to come down here and I'm going to click on the extrusion that I just made, the latest extrusion, which in my timeline I know is the sawtooth that I just cut. And the first thing I want to do with the rectangular pattern, once I create the object, or sorry, select the object, is I want to click on the direction that I want this sawtooth to be repeated in, which is along this edge, the blade edge. So I've highlighted that. And oh geez, okay. So here's what I'm defining. I'm defining 128.5. That's going to be the total distance that this is repeated along this pattern. And we already know that we created a sawtooth pitch, a repeating pattern, such that we could get 160 teeth through the blade. 160. Okay. So oh, geez. This is the distance, 128.5. And we want this to be 100. What is this? What is going on? Quantity at 160. I'm going to click OK. What's going on? Direction along that edge. Did the wrong one. This we don't want any pattern in this axis here. My computer's really slow right now. Gotta be patient as it loads. The reason it's taking so long to compute this is because I've arrayed a single object 160 by 160 times. So it has to think about rendering that. When in reality, I just want 160, a row of 160 instead of an array of 160 by 160. Maybe it will, yeah, I pissed it off. All right, once we're done with this, we're gonna review and save it. Oh my gosh, it's the colorful wheel of death. I'm gonna click escape if I can. Redo this. Alrighty, so I had to redo this because I maxed out the computational power of either my computer or Fusion. So I crashed Fusion, and I did that by making a 160 by 160 array of these saw teeth. So instead, I want to make just a single row of this blade. Let's try that. Let's go. We're at 128.5 and we wanted 160 of them. This still might take a second to load, but it should be doable. I have all right, so that's going in the wrong direction. Quantity 1. So it's this edge that I'm concerned with. 160 and 128. There we go. So you'll see that the spacing should be, now it's loading. I'm just gonna click OK. And we'll take a look at the spacing when it figures that out. Let's click home. Wow, it's frozen. There we go. So the spacing is perfect. We have our pitch of, well, we don't even know that 0.803, and it should be 160 teeth in the, and we should end on this point right here, which we do, which is great. This extra little line here is because we didn't cut all the way through the end of the blade. We could, you know, just to, for sake of completeness, start another sketch. Come over to here, and you can see there's that tiny little point because we ended just before the end. We'll just go like this. This is kind of a roundabout way of doing it. Make a circle big enough to encapsulate that little piece. I'm going to extrude, cut, and we're going to go to object. There. I forgot to, we're going to select that profile. Go to object, select that face. Cut. All right, and that's gone. Okay, so now we have a new saw blade design. And we can kind of toggle between the two to see the difference. So there's mine, and there's the old one. Let's go to home. Okay, and we can even, you know, go back up to the blade holder, right? And activate the assembly and see the various blade designs within the holder. So right now I have the first blade open. I don't really want to have both showing at once, but say you wanted to see, you know, your various components. and how they maybe line up to other components in an assembly. You can toggle on and off on the different designs and see what they look like. Cool. That is that.